to the Right Honourable Alex Salmond, First Minister of Scotland.
Well, Robert, Provost, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to celebrate a bit of history and making a bit of history, but it is quite recent history in many ways. Just a few years ago, we had a demonstration in Turra, some of you might remember it, to protest against the closure of Buchanmeat. It was a good demonstration, a lively demonstration. It was incidentally a successful demonstration because Buchanmeat now exists as Morrison's and provides employment in this town. But we demonstrated through Turra. We went into the Union Hotel and I was highly pleased by the turnout of the demonstration, and in a fit of enthusiasm I declared to the crowd that this was the biggest demonstration in Turra since the general strike. And an old boy in the front row looked at me and said, "There wasn't a demonstration during the general strike." Well, I said, yes, but there was one during the Turra Coo in 1913. And this is another crowd today, like the crowd that gathered to protest against the perceived injustice in December 1913. And although, of course, the crowd today is much better behaved than the crowd of 1913, I see that Grampian and Constabulary have taken the precaution of sheltering in Boots the chemist. And I see that authorities, and I suppose I must represent authority these days, if you look up there, you can see the fly past apparate mark this occasion. So this is history making history, but it is quite recent history. When I had the privilege of being the Member of Parliament for this town in 1987, the Secretary of the Scottish National Party in Turra was Miss Patterson, Robert Patterson's daughter. Fine woman. Robert Patterson's granddaughter, Mrs. Davidson, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, are still alive and well and here today, of course, ladies and gentlemen. So this is a recent history, a living history. Of course, the story has many intricacies of the Turra Coo, but what it was actually about was injustice and perceived injustice. It was felt that the national insurance obligations were unfair on the rural economy and on rural workers. That's why the signpost says Lendrum 5 miles and London 577 miles, because it was a message from Turra to London that people wouldn't accept injustice foisted upon them. And it was a message about the character, perhaps, of the folk of the northeast of Scotland, that they weren't prepared to lie down and accept injustice. And David Lloyd George was a famous and a very, very great man, a war leader in the First World War that he came on. Perhaps he was steeled by his experience of the Turra Coo protest to become an even better war leader. But 100 years later, of course, I believe there's a liberal man at the Treasury in terms of the Chief Secretary, Danny Alexander. And I'll tell you, Danny Alexander is no David Lloyd George, but nonetheless, perhaps messages should still be made by the people of the northeast of Scotland when they see perceived injustice. I want to congratulate the artists, obviously, Ginny, Charles and David, but in particular all the groups within this town and all the people who contributed to make this wonderful sculpture, but more than that, the whole education programme that goes behind it. Because what makes people special, what makes communities special, is a sense of shared history. The incident, the series of incidents of the Turra Coo are part of the shared history, not just of this town, but of the northeast of Scotland. What they represent should be known and understood by the generations to come, because they're really, really important. Now, of course, there's a very practical aspect to these things, that this sculpture will be noted, it will be looked at, people will come to Turra, come to this high street, this thriving high street, in order to see the sculpture and to engage and hear about the story. All of that's important. This is a big crowd today. There is a practical aspect to this celebration. But what this celebration is really about is celebration of the history and the heritage of the people of the northeast of Scotland, of their determination to stand against perceived injustice when they see it, and to send a message from Lendrum to London that they are not prepared to accept injustice lying down. And I hope and believe that that spirit will never die in this community. Thank you very much. First Minister.
thank you very much indeed for those words, and the crowd is still behaving themselves. It's now time for the official unveiling of the Turra Coo sculpture. It's been 5 years in the planning through Turra Tourism Action Group, and a lot of hard work and dedication from that group of